against each other and you'll unlock their feud card. And as if that doesn't sound cool enough, the universe of characters is awesome too, considering the game is set in the 80s and 90s, also known as the two greatest decades in the history of pop culture and pro wrestling. 80s Mania Wrestling Returns is free to play, and the developers are constantly updating the game with new characters and new features. Just search for 80s Mania Wrestling Returns in the App Store or your Google Play Store. And check this out. Once you've played through the in-game tutorial, head to the settings screen and enter this cheat code, Conrad, to unlock a bunch of wrestler cards at Game Cache. Wrestling fans, pop culture fans, 80s and 90s nostalgia fans, check this game out. You will not regret it. 80s Mania Wrestling Returns. Let's talk about our main event. It's not the last match on the card, but it is the real main event. Ricky Steamboat defending the world title against Ric Flair. It's the third match, the rubber match, the final one between the two here in 89. As a reminder, Chi-Town Rumble, Steamboat goes over Flair to win the title. Fast forward, Clash of the Champions is 2 out of 3 falls. Again, Steamboat wins, but it's apparent that Flair's foot was on the bottom rope. So here's the rematch. They get plenty of time, 31 minutes and 37 seconds. Meltzer absolutely loves it. He gives it a tremendous rating. And he writes, "It was all there, outstanding ring entrances, but did they really need to hire the entire modeling agency? They opened up by trading spots that you had to see to believe. Chops. The first 17 minutes was spent doing an occasional awesome spot, intersped with Steamboat doing arm drags and working the left arm. The work was super stiff to the point it was mind-boggling. From the 17-minute mark on, this is the best match I've ever seen live in this country." So it's pretty remarkable that these guys had such incredible matches already, and somehow this one raises the bar even greater. What'd you think? You watched this one back for the first time in a long time. Of the three, which is your favorite? Chicago, New Orleans, or Nashville?
Chicago was going to be hard to beat for me because, I told that story that I didn't know what the finish in Chicago was going to be until George Scott, who was booking at that time, pulled me off the side as I was walking to the announce position and said, "We're going to change the bell tonight." And I felt so deflated. I just didn't want to know that. I mean, it wasn't that I didn't agree with it, but I wanted to be surprised. And so, but I thought that was an amazing match. So Chicago might be my second favorite. The timing issues and the 2 out of 3 faller and the empty Superdome would have been the third match, but this one's my favorite because it had everything that Meltzer's laying out. The match itself was artwork. Again, if talents are listening to this show, and again, we thank you for that, and you want to look at something look at transitions, look at going from moveset to moveset, to go from looking at chain wrestling, physical wrestling, every aspect of the psychological warfare and the intense physicality in a pro wrestling match. This is one that if you haven't seen it, just because it's 1989, don't think everybody's wearing, wool tights and low cut boots. This son of a bitch will stand the test of time. And I've gotten some very good debates with people about, they can't believe that I don't automatically sign off that Omega and Okada's 3 matches were so much better than Flair and Steamboat. It's not even funny. To that, I say bullshit. The Omega and Okada matches were phenomenal. They really were, but they didn't happen over a span of 4 months or 5 months. It was drawn out. It let it build. It let it take roots. It was good booking. We rushed our shit, and that match was rushed, but the delivery was incomparable. So if you get a chance to watch that, folks, look at all the little nuances. Look at how they got from point A to point B. Look how all the dots are connected, and then going into a believable finish at the end of the day. Still with Steamboat, who thought he was going to get some return matches out of this deal, which didn't happen, but the finish was structured to give Ricky some protection as well, but then put the title back on Flair, which we started a whole new chapter in Ric Flair's life and career in the post-match.
Really remarkable. Meltzer would say 5 stars doesn't do this entire scenario justice. The match itself was a better match live than in Chicago, and most that I've talked with who saw the pay-per-view felt it was the best of their 3 national matches. although some still opted for New Orleans as being the best. Of course, the post match is just remarkable. The angle here, of course, is they had Funk at ringside. He's one of the judges. He's going to come in and ask for a title shot. Flair is going to dismiss him in a friendly way and say, well, you got to earn a shot, and we have rankings here. Of course, Funk gets pissed off, attacks him, the huge angle, including a pile driver on the table. They stretcher Flair out. He's in bad shape. He's going to be injured and out of action until the June 14th Clash of the Champions. And it's interesting to see what they're building towards here. The next big pay-per-view will be Baltimore, Great American Bash. And it's, of course, Flair Funk. And then we're going to blow it off in December at New York Knockout at Clash of the Champions. But what a time for Ric Flair to transition from one of his all-time greatest trilogies to maybe one of his greatest opponents here with Terry Funk. I mean, most would agree Ricky Steamboat was his greatest opponent, but a totally different style of match, but just as compelling with Terry Funk. Would you agree?
Yeah, it was different styles. The old styles make fights and all that good stuff that people like to talk about. To compare Steamboat and Terry Funk is like, comparing a fillet and to another premium cut of meat. It's just this protein, but it's a different taste. It's a different presentation. And I thought that I was a little unnerved in that post match because, it's not like back in the WWE days where you have writers and you have these guys. Here's your script, and you should say this, and here's the bullet points. Or I never saw any of that stuff. I didn't have any. I knew they were going to shoot an angle. It's the old deal. And we're going to JR you're going to interview Flair, and then Terry's going to come in the ring. We're going to do a little business. That's kind of what you got. We're going to do some business. Okay. As long as I'm not getting bumped around, so I got to be in the right place at the right time. That's pretty much all I need to know. So, but Terry was so believable. It was like he was middle-aged and crazy. It's like, he's having a blackout or something. He's not coherent. This is scary because he was that good. And so then they did their thing, and nobody said, "Hey, well, that spotted tonight when Flair gets pile driven through the table." Nobody talked about that because nobody knew it was going to happen. So it was good, spontaneous stuff, and unnerving because it was so real. It was so real. It's like Terry was in a desperate state. I got a challenge. I'm 45 or whatever he was, and I'm not going to get a lot of these chances. This is a prime opportunity for me to make Flair defend the title against me. He'll want retribution after what I'm going to do to him, and it's almost like Terry was a little on the edge of a nervous breakdown or something. He was that good at his role, and to think that talents could do that without writers, without somebody telling them what to say, is absolutely amazing. How good Terry Funk was, and of course Nate, they're verbally sparring, and Nate blew it off real well. Played kind of the low key babyface type thing, and he didn't start screaming at Terry, and I'm Ric Flair, you know who I am, and all that. He handled it perfectly. So it was really a neat deal, and for me, it worked because I wasn't smartened up to what all was going to happen. Even as the announcer, even in the ring, holding the microphone between two of the greatest of all time. For me to look back on my career at its seminal moments, that's one of them. Just standing there, Conrad, with a sweaty new champion. Had been through war. Then you got middle-aged and crazy Terry Funk in his tuxedo after leaving his seat next to Pat O'Connor and Lou Thez. Pretty impressive panel, by the way. And then getting in the ring and doing his thing was, I don't know, it was surreal. But that was a big honor for me to even be standing there between those two dudes. And I still look back at it today. Thank God we're all still alive, knock on wood again. And maybe someday the three of us will get together and have us a cold beer and talk about that. But I loved every minute of it. It was just great. It was hardcore. It was coarse. It was unrehearsed. It was real as real can get in that respect. So when you go back and watch it, folks, understand all those things. There was no big rehearsal in the afternoon. There was no walkthrough. There was no writers and little clipboards hanging around. It was two pros that knew the direction they were going to travel. They didn't know the exact route to take, but they knew their destination. And the route was going to be determined on when the trip got started. In other words, we're going to call it as we go. And they did, and it was artwork.
I feel like we should mention right here that this is pretty subtle, but coming into this, Flair's the bad guy. Steamboat's the good guy. When it's over with, though, the crowd is almost 50-50. They're sort of pulling for Rick. And, man, it is cemented that Ric Flair's the good guy when Terry Funk brutally attacks him like this. I mean, he's been like one of the more prolific heels in wrestling for years at this point, Ric Flair, I mean.
Yep.
And now to turn him, it takes the crazy bastard, the middle-aged and crazy Terry Funk, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Great chemistry. Timing, so important in everything we do in life. But timing, the timing of that whole moment to recapture the magic that is Terry Funk, to pair Terry Funk with Ric Flair, and it was great booking. That was really great booking. But the great booking always starts with the talents you're booking, you're utilizing. And how can you get any better than that? The classic heel, great promos, easy to dislike within his TV persona, and then arguably the greatest in-ring performer of all time, who people loved, respected. He was time-honored. He was tenured. So everything came together. And quite frankly, both those guys had a lot of similar qualities as far as length of career, success, championships, NWA titles, all those things. So I loved it. You know, when I go back and watch it, I was in awe of, first of all, how Steamboat and Rick executed their match to set the table for the angle. And as I understand it, I don't think Steamboat even knew what they were going to do. I think, you know, he was going to have their match. He was going to do the honors. Flair's going to give him some accolades, raise his hand, hug, whatever. And then Ricky was going to, you know, ease his way out of the scene. J.R. gets in the ring to interview Flair. Here comes Funk to quote unquote do some business. And brother, they did some business.
Yes, they did. And I'm glad you brought up the Ricky Steamboat thing, because he's gone on record as saying, I looked back in the ring after our match and they've got another thing going on. No one told me this was going to happen. I was awestruck. I just dropped the title to Flair, and I thought it would at least warrant one more series of matches to see if I could get it back. I didn't care if I won or not. I never did. Just wanted to work with Rick again. Instead, they went right into another angle. And it's worth mentioning, they're very quickly going to set him up with Lex Luger. And after the Great American Bash in July, Steamboat's out of here. How hurt do you think Steamboat was? Do you think that he finally felt like, man, I'm finally getting my just due. I'm finally getting a push? Because I think, if memory serves, he left and went to the WWF years prior because he felt like Dusty Rhodes was not going to push him and instead was going to favor Magnum TA and the like. And now fast forward a few years, he's back and he probably thinks, okay, here's my shot. I'm finally in the main events. I'm working with Rick. We have great matches. We love working with each other. I'm the world champ. And now I'm not figured into that top spot anymore. Was that pretty devastating for Ricky? Did you know that he was unhappy in this time, or what can you tell us about Ricky's sort of state of mind here?
I think Ricky if I'm not mistaken, Conrad, I think Ricky had kind of a tumultuous, marriage.
Yeah.
And I think that that was probably his biggest cause of consternation. But to not be informed of what was going on after you're losing the world title was disrespectful. And that's how I perceive Ricky felt. How much disrespect we didn't know, because, you know, again, in my role as a broadcaster, I tried to stay away from all that stuff. I didn't need or want that extra information. So I didn't know that, I didn't have a clue that, you know, he was going to do that. You know, he didn't have a clue. I didn't have a clue. Nobody knew. So I can see where Ricky kind of felt like he was kayfabing that deal. And you don't do that to your champion. because earlier in the day, when all that had been discussed,